yet joined. Yeah, so let's start with you, our good panelists. Madam Natasha, you can start by unmuting and you greet our listeners and a very brief introduction. Then we shall go to Mr. Kwame Rugunda as we wait for the Secretary General to join us. Thank you very much.
Hello, am I on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, all. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion, Jonah, and for discussing something that's very near and dear to my heart personally. So I'm very glad and honored to be here. My name is Natasha Museveni Karujire, and a couple of other names which I'll leave for another time. I am a believer, a follower of Jesus. I am a wife and a mother. I am an Africanist, African, a writer, artist of different shades and stripes. That's what they say. Yeah. So I'm very glad and happy and honored to be here.
To start our discussion, I would like to come to you, Madam Natasha. There is the president who is the president, the father of the nation, and then there is the president who is the leader, the father of the nation, and there is the president who is the father at home. So I wanted you to paint for us a picture, taking us through the childhood memories that you have of this president who is the father, looking at the starting of his revolutionary work. So I wanted you to paint for us that picture, the interactions you had with him, how those days were. So kindly guide us on that. Thank you.
Okay, the memories that I have of maybe, which are coherent will probably be when it was around 1980, before we Mama and us that had their children left Uganda. And I remember, what I remember about Mzee is he was, of me personally, from childhood, he has been my friend. And I was the first born daughter, the first girl. Before me is General Kainerugaba. So he was my older brother. And so I was the first girl, then followed 2 years later by Patience, and then another 2 years by Diana. But my memories of him in 1980 at least, and then, I'm sure he kind of, spoiled me and so on. But also, I remember him every morning. He would sharpen. He had this thing he did. He sharpened his. I wrote about it in my book. He sharpened his the edge of his palm, or the hand, the edge of the palm. He'd sharpen it on the pavement outside the house every single morning, both hands. And eventually, later on, when I was now a bit older, I learned that it was for karate and all that. But it was just some of his peculiarities. He was, of course, always busy, always, all this. But as a child, you don't know really any of that. All I think I remember, what I also write about in the story that I wrote, is that I do remember growing up in that there was a house we stayed in Kololo, where there were always soldiers. And the Saleh was there, and the Rijema, and many other people, so many people somewhere in that house, which I always wonder. I went back in last year, 2022, to see how all those people managed to live in that house. But those are some of my memories. So I think I'm going to just go over to you and hear if I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, very, very well. You're going in the right direction. as we can understand, at a particular time, he left you guys and he started his revolutionary work. So, first of all, how did that affect you as a family and you as an individual? As you say, you are very close to him. And also, yeah, some people may not know. I have read the book. All that is in the book, and I must say it's a very nice book. First of all, it's very simple. You wrote it in the simplest way. And also, being a biography, it's very easy to read. You'll be wanting to know what happened next, what happened next. So, help others understand, how was that experience like for you? What were those detailed incidents that happened at that time when he left you people and he came to start his revolutionary work, and how did it affect you?
He was doing that work. He was doing it, I think, all through, even before we were born, when we were born. Things that I only learned now later, even reading Mama's book and hearing them tell the stories later. He was doing that work. He would see us maybe be born today, and then tomorrow he was in some other country, crossing rivers, crossing lakes, all sorts of adventures, really. So for me, by the time when we left Uganda, that 1980, when I tell my children the stories, it sounds like a movie to them, because we were taken across the border by car. We were taken by Mr. Ernest Kakwano and Mrs. Alice Kakwano and their children, smuggled through the border. Told not to say all sorts. It was quite intense. And then we lived in exile in Kenya. I am sure it was very feelings of insecurity, like any exile would feel, any refugee would feel. But I think more so because there was some kind of bounty on. There was Mama was really living under duress, and I suppose it was much more for her because she's the mother of these children, and she was somehow being hunted where we were. And then again we moved, escaped again. When there was trouble for Ugandan exiles in Kenya, we escaped again to Sweden, and as children you adapt and everything, and it was manageable for us, and you don't really know that there's a gap until you see your father again, and things like that. But I think now, as an older person, I always think about my mother, and I have memories now of her struggles, of her her sadness and all that, especially because with her she never even knew if he's dead or alive, or none of that. So now as a woman, I try to look back and think, if I had those young children in a foreign land, and the husband, you'll never know whether you'll see him again. In what way will you see him again? Yeah, I need to.
Yeah, I really do understand you. It was really a tough moment. I can really understand. I read the book. There is a part which is kind of entertaining. Actually, it was a Saturday, like today, that afternoon, when 1985, when you open the door and then there's this tall gentleman with a hanky. So maybe you can take us back to that moment. How did you feel? What happened exactly? And I think you can understand what I'm talking about. Page 28.
Yeah, yes, I remember. This is the day, and we were in Sweden, and we had not seen him for many years. I think for me, I seem to remember that I hadn't seen him since we left Uganda in 1981. Although he says he came through Nairobi at some point for I don't know, but I don't remember that anyway. So we saw him. The doorbell rings, and we had learned now to live without him. In fact, we were a bit suspicious of Africans, and we were surrounded by Swedes and other nationalities. I had a friend from Yugoslavia, the Americans, and so on. But there were very, very few Africans. The only other Africans were some few Ugandans whom we knew very well. So there were no unknown Africans. So when I opened the door, there was In fact, even Dr. Rugunda lived in Sweden, but in a different, the Kwame's lived in Sweden somewhere, but in a different city, I believe, and others. So yeah, when I opened the door, I saw a stranger. He just looked not how I remembered him in my mind, because in my mind he was light-skinned and just not quite as rough as the man who was standing outside the door. So he was dark and didn't look like the man that was in my mind. So and he had his hanky, yes, and he asked me if I was going to greet him, and I ran back to Mama and told her that there's a man, a black man, standing at the door, saying that he's my father. Because he said, "Are you going to greet Daddy?" So I ran back and told Mama. Anyway, so he comes in and there's joy and jubilation, and then I think who had only seen him. In fact, she had never seen. She was a baby when we left Uganda. Now she was, I think, like 4 or 5. I don't remember. So she had no idea who he was, and so on. So yeah, that was a very, very wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's
people.
I think
Just I used to bring people home to like how you bring people to a museum to see. He did, like, here, look at this person. This is my father. So like that. Huh?
yes. It must have been a real like happy moment. Also, there are some incidents which you talk about also in the book, like moments later. Now he's here. He has come back. So kindly, I know I love that story. Maybe you can add us some of those details. Days after he has arrived home. Um, every minute, Dad will beat you. I'm going to report you to Dad. So how were those moments also?
They were interesting because we had lived with our mom. She had struggled with us all those years, like I suppose like many single moms. So we had really just known our mom, who was with us. She was the one who was, responsible for discipline and everything. It was her, and and our aunt was also would help her, was with us as well. But of course, with them, soon after he came, he found us there. We were immediately, all of the children were saying, if you keep doing that, I'm going to tell Daddy. Immediately, we switched to, to giving him first place and all that. There was just a lot of happiness. And I remember he would I've talked about it before, he would wake us up because he used to wake up and do his exercises and his drills every morning. So he would wake us up at, I don't know, 5 a.m. in still dark in winter, and make us do those drills, military drills, teaching us Swahili, teaching us turn this side and turn that side, and so on. So it was just a very interesting time. Very interesting time.
Thank you so much. So that was his time reconnecting with you, or when you were still abroad. Then there was this time when you had just come back. He's receiving you. How was that moment like for you, and what are those details that happened on that day?
Coming back to Uganda was of course, I don't even know. I'm not sure how I can explain it. I don't think I really understood until we had come back and settled and so on. But when we came back, he was at the airport. He was, dressed in military uniform, and he was very serious, and things were very different for us. And the place was different. The house we were going to was different. Everything was different, really. But, and I think that now we came, when he came to Sweden, he was somehow away from, so he had time to really, kind of rebond with his family and so on. But when we came back here now, I think there was a whole burden of the responsibility of what him and all his comrades had come into, this responsibility. So he was a bit, not no, not stressed, but he was not as as playful and so on. Initially, in the beginning, he had, I think he was quite burdened with all the new responsibility that they had come into. But with time, he was a little bit less stressed, and then and then of course we started going to school in Kampala parents, and adjusting to that, coming from the Swedish system where the teachers had to talk to you so nicely. They had to ask for, they had to really tiptoe around the children. Coming here where if you don't answer the right question, they beat you if you don't do this. It was quite a culture shock for us, but it was wonderful. Being back home was wonderful. You just felt that there was something that had been missing in your heart that you didn't know was missing until you are back in your own country, and now you feel complete in a sense.
So I would like to ask you first, what inspired you to do these projects, and also what are those things that you think the world needs to know about this revolution? Because it's the biggest component in the president's legacy, and indeed people really need to know the details about this. And you being in that area filming, you must have interacted with a lot of people and gotten access to a lot of information. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Jonah, and thank you to our speakers, Secretary General Todwong, and Honorable Aber, and my brother Kwame. Before I answer your question, Jonah, I wanted to just say that I agree with what the other panelists were talking about. Secretary General Todwong talked about when the NRM came into power and how they mostly integrated those who are willing to join the NRM. And I think these traits really say a lot about who Museveni is, the character of the person of Museveni. So in incorporating those who were originally maybe adversaries, now they incorporated those.
I think it's network. Madam Natasha, we are losing you.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. We lost you at the point of integrating those who disagree with him as his personal trait, so you were there.
Yeah, I was saying that speaks the character of whom Museveni is as a person. He is truly what the Bible talks about, a peacemaker. The Bible says, I think, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. That is his core character. So I wanted to agree with what Secretary General was saying. I wanted to agree with what Kwame was saying about, he really gave a very good profile or something on Museveni, giving it like season by season of Museveni's life, of him being a Pan-Africanist from the time of his youth, and so I agree with that. I think it is another core characteristic of his is being a defender, really, of Africans and Africa and our identity and so on. And Honorable Aber spoke about somewhere in her as she was speaking, talked about him being a teacher, and said if Ugandans are keen to actually hear what he's saying, we could all really glean a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and it would impact our lives for good. But sometimes, when you have a parent who's telling you something, you feel like, oh, I've heard this before, and you don't, really pay attention. But I agree with her. We should listen, and each of us individually can impact our lives for the better. Am I with you, Jonah? You're with me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, so you asked about why I felt the need to tell the stories of the Bush War and the documentary that we did recently. It is just because I felt, or it was in my heart, it was put on my heart that this is a great story, a big testimony and a big part of our history as a nation, but which I felt has not been, and I was not alone, I believe in this sentiment, has not been told well or told enough. And that's where that burden came from. That's how that process started, of making telling the story of 27 guns, of the courage it took, and all the suffering, and the suffering of the combatants, Museveni and the fighters, and the people, and it was just it's an incredible story of courage, faith, resilience.
I think network is breaking.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you there.
I was saying that I myself have.
Yeah, there is a network challenge. You break off, but now I think you are clear. We can hear you now.
I was saying that the young people. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now very well.
The young people don't know much about this our history, and that vacuum is not a good thing. So that's where this need to tell these stories has come from. So that's how we came to tell the story of 27 Guns, and then do the documentary. And in the process of doing the documentary, it was just reinforcing what I already know about Museveni, but also maybe getting more information from those who went to school with him. And I think what Kwame was saying, and what all the panelists were saying, is that he's just someone, I believe, who is really just set apart, who has had a calling on his life from birth, and just been a bit different from the usual. And you hear that when I interviewed some of his schoolmates from primary school and secondary school and university, and all through, there's always been something just different about him as a human being. And so we're very many. There have been many other. There have been other African, greats who have set out to do to change things, to change things as they were at the time. Whether it's think of, I don't know, Amilcar Cabral and Kwame Nkrumah and Lumumba and others, but they haven't had the privilege to live to see what the fruit of their labor. So I think it is. I'm thankful to you for putting this together, so that some of us can come and celebrate Museveni, and thank God for him. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered that.
Yes, you have answered it very well. Thank you. But also, there is other panelists have talked about his success in leadership, and of course, these are things that we see every day in our communities. And yeah, it's a fact. It's the truth. We agree all with that. But I wanted to pick from you, what are those qualities of him? Yes, some of them have been mentioned by these people, our panelists who have been discussing. But what more do you have to say about the personality of Museveni, his qualities as an individual, that you think have led to his successful leadership, the achievements which we have registered and all that? So in case there is any that you feel they have not detailed well, maybe you can take us through those.
I think the panelists have really mentioned the ones that most of us, I believe, as Ugandans know. I think Honorable Abir spoke about his patience. His patience is next level, really. It's quite unique. I completely agree. But I have come to appreciate it a lot, much as, sometimes you feel like, no, really, But I appreciate most of actually all his characteristics. So he is patient. I've heard people talk about it as strategic patience. So he's just a very, very unique human being. He is he's exceptionally wise, a brilliant mind. I believe that Mzee is a very kind human being. As a human being, as a person, he's just very kind. I think Kwame spoke about it when he said that he has lived his life in service of a higher, cause. I believe that's what he said. So from all his life, he has lived in service of others, of people. Somewhere I read a quote from his headmaster from Muntari, a British man, saying that he was always a chap in search of a cause, and he was always looking for a cause, and he found his cause. So he's a person who, from birth, really had destiny about him. Even when Mama tells you the stories of when she met him, he was just not the usual kind of man. Even in their courtship, he was so different. So those are things that his kindness, I think, for me also, as a parent, but not just a parent, to us as his biological children, but I think most people can attest to his kind nature. And I don't know what other, there's so many. I'm sure if I took a minute there's his qualities he's one of a kind. I say it a lot, but that's what I believe.
Thank you so much, Madam. Thank you very much.